Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Quentin and you're watching Mid-South Outdoor Life. Today I'm going to do my best to try to honor the requests of my subscribers by doing a review on these. I call these the ultimate DIY portable bait well and live wells. I built these months ago. I've been using them ever since. I've had lots of requests to do an in-depth video on this box. We're going to do that today, and I'm going to do my best to try to show you how you can build them. No matter what you're thinking, you can build these even with basic tools. So let's get going. I'm not a mind reader and I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to go ahead and guess that you clicked on this video because you've been doing research on how to build your own live well or where to get custom live wells. You've probably been looking at live wells converted from coolers, maybe converting truck toolboxes, those sorts of things. But probably the one thing that I want to try to drive home in your minds today is to think outside the box. Literally. You guys don't need to purchase someone else's box in order to create your custom live well for your custom application. You know, I'm sure some of you are wanting a live well for bass fishing. Maybe you're a part of Tiny Boat Nation, which, by the way, if you don't know what that is, it's a really cool Facebook page with all kinds of custom projects just like this. It's all about guys who build smaller boats, smaller, more affordable boats than those $60,000 bass boats that you're gonna find at the big retailers. And they customize everything. They make everything at home and they make them really awesome. Love that page, Tiny Boat Nation, check it out. But anyway, back to the point. You guys have probably been looking at converting a cooler, or maybe you catfish guys that are doing catfish tournaments, you've been looking at converting a big, bulky, awkwardly shaped truck toolbox. Stop thinking like that. Get outside the box because you can make your own box. It doesn't have to be identical to this one, but maybe this will help you understand that you don't have to conform to something that's readily available in some store and then convert that. You can start from nothing and build your own and get exactly what you need for the exact amount of space and for the exact species that you're going to be putting in it. Or in this case, maybe you only want to store bait. That's what I built this one for. This one is 29 gallons. I realize that that's enough for bass fishermen. This would easily keep 5 trophy bass alive for a full day of bass tournaments. But for catfishing, we need a lot of volume just for our bait, and that's what I built this one for. In fact, one of the only ways that this one is different from the larger one that we're going to look at, other than its volume, is that it has some rounded corners to it. You look inside here, you can see that I've got inserts in the corners of this box that round off the corners. That's important for a species like a shad because they tend to run the perimeter of whatever they're in. Maybe other fish do too, I'm not sure. So if you're going to do a bait well, that's one thing to remember is you're going to want to round your corners. I'll show you a little bit on how I did that a little bit later. But other than the rounded corners and the volume, this box and the larger one are the exact same. They use the same materials, they're the same design, the same construction, other than dimension. They even use the same type of plumbing. I do a spray bar aerator type setup. I'll go ahead and show you a little bit about that now, and it applies to both of them. This is just standard Schedule 40 PVC stuff, but one thing that's important to note is that I made these easily removable. Rather than using a pressure fitting and just gluing them in, I used a threaded fitting. You can see I guess you can see there's holes drilled in this to create a spray bar effect to better aerate the water, to put more oxygen in the water. That makes a big difference, by the way, in keeping your fish alive, whether they be bait or trophies. But the reason you want this removable is in some water you're going to pick up lots of debris, little pieces of leaves, seeds, even pollen that might be on the surface of the water is going to accumulate. And these tiny holes, they're going to get plugged up. And if you glue this together, then you're going to have a problem. So what I found, the best way to do it is to make it a threaded fitting, because when these clog up throughout the day, you can just unscrew it, shake it out, and you're back in action, spraying a nice tight stream of water that's putting fresh oxygen in your water. Let's talk just for a moment about why you might want to consider going to the trouble of building your own enclosure from scratch rather than going to a store, buying an existing enclosure, and then converting it. Number one, price. Believe it or not, both of these two, we'll just call them live wells. That's a bait well to me, but we'll call them live wells. Both of these two live wells together, complete, for everything. I built both of them for less than $200. Now, if you're of the mindset of just going and buying a cheap cooler and slapping a Mr. Bubble box on it, that might sound expensive. But if you're wanting to go a little bit, not higher end, but if you want to get a little bit more in depth than that, like if you're one of those guys that's maybe going to try to convert a truck toolbox for trophy catfish tournaments, $200 is actually quite good for two complete units. But beyond the price, the next big reason to consider building from scratch is use of space. You want to make sure that you get the absolute maximum amount of water volume possible for the amount of floor space or deck space that you're going to give up on your boat. I mean, water volume is extremely important when you want to keep fish alive, whether it be bait or trophies. The more water that you have in there, the more regulated the water temperature will be, the more oxygen that you'll have at any given time. For example, if your pump were to go down, or if you needed to pull into an area where you didn't want to pump that water in, the more water that's on board at any given time, the more oxygen that's going to be on tap for those fish. And then just the custom option that you get when you build your own enclosure. If you're going to convert a truck toolbox, the shape is going to be awkward. The dimensions are almost certainly not going to be ideal for your boat. Same thing goes with the cooler. What are the odds that the nook or the area of floor space that you're going to give up on your boat to set a cooler is going to be exact, where that cooler fits in there exactly where you want it to be? It's either going to be a little too small or a little too big. Furthermore, on a cooler, the walls are really, really thick if it's insulated, and while it might not seem like much to have a 2-inch thick wall, by the time you consider all the surface area of all that insulation all the way around the unit, you're giving up a lot of water volume, and you don't want to give up that water volume. Going custom gets past all that. We mentioned water temperatures. Those truck toolboxes, man, those things get hot. Have you ever put your hand on some of that shiny that shiny diamond plate, or maybe even a black metal truck box, on a midsummer day? Man, you'll almost burn your skin off. Well, what do you think that does to the water? This design and this material won't heat the water up at all. We'll go ahead and get into that right now, because we're going to talk about the basic construction and the material choices that I think make this such a doable project for everybody at home, in their garage, even with basic tools. This design concept that I went with is quite simple, and that's one of the things I like about it. You have a very limited amount of materials and products in general that you have to work with. Let's talk about the outside. This outside is actually the same thing that I used for all the walls when I built Lucille, my boat. You're going to find this, you could get it at a sign shop. However, I recommend, if you live in a city that's large enough that has several sign shops, you check around and try to find the actual supplier that the sign shops deal with, because you're going to get a better deal on this than buying it from a sign shop. But this is, some places will call it a Luma board, some places will call it composite board, but what it is 2 super thin sheets of aluminum sandwiched around a thin sheet of plastic composite. It's super lightweight. I mean, this whole box, believe it or not, this whole box is lightweight. And this is a 91-gallon live well. This will hold a 150-pound catfish and keep them alive. Not that I've caught one of those, but one day. 91 gallons. This aluminum board is lightweight. It's really easy to cut and to work with. It's quite durable. We sit on the top of this box all the time, and it holds up to that quite well. It gets kicked, it gets hit with sinkers. Even the paint that's on the aluminum sheets holds up quite well. Go to your sign shop or go to the supplier for the sign shop. Skip Lowe's and Home Depot. You're not going to find it there, and even if you did, it'd be too pricey. Again, built both these units for less than $200 all in. So that's material one, the outside, aluminum board. It's 1/8 inch thick. You can get it in full sheets, or if you'll get it from the supplier for the sign shop, they'll actually cut it for you. And that's what I did, just to save myself some time. After I built the frame, I'll put the pictures of the frame up here on the side of the screen. After I built the frame, I took precise measurements of what I knew I wanted all my sheets to be. And when I went to purchase the aluminum board, I just said, hey, here's the pieces I need and here's the dimensions I want it. And they can get this stuff cut absolutely perfect for you. And they didn't charge me any extra either, so that's the route that I went. So material number one is aluminum board. The frame, again, super simple. This is 1 inch square aluminum tubing, and it's 16 gauge. You don't need thicker than that. Again, we want to keep this lightweight. You want to be able to get it on and off your boat easy. You don't want to have to call a friend over to help you move into your boat for a day of fishing. So 1 inch square, 1/16 gauge square aluminum tubing makes up the entire frame with the exception of two pieces. I'll show them to you right here. This piece, if you can see it, the piece behind the frame, right here you can see it, there's two pieces there. That's just standard aluminum angle, just a 90-degree angle. I believe that's 16 gauge also. Yeah, it is 16 gauge also. You're going to get added strength from this aluminum board by the time everything's put together. That's another reason that you don't have to go with a really heavy gauge aluminum when you build one of these. Particularly on the smaller unit, the 29-gallon unit, you definitely don't need thicker than 16 gauge. So you've got aluminum board and you've got two different types of pieces of aluminum. Other than that, the only other materials are a piano hinge that's back here. I used piano hinges on both of them. I find that if I use a piano hinge with something like this rather than individual door hinges, I get something that sits, it installs more true and it operates more true, if that makes sense, no binding. Piano hinge and rivets, aluminum board, square aluminum tubing, aluminum angle, piano hinge and rivets. That's it. It's super simple. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are going, I don't have a freaking welder. I realize that. A lot of DIY guys don't have a welder at home, especially one that does aluminum. However, there's an easy way to get around that. If you'll do a good job in planning out your project, I'll put the frame over there on the side of the screen again. If you'll put your energy into making sure you know exactly what dimensions you want your frame to be, and do all your cutting at home and do it precisely. If you don't have a bandsaw or good metalworking materials, you can go get a cheap $20 miter box to cut the angles that you're going to need to cut. I only have 90s and 45s in here. That's it. There's nothing fancy about this. And a miter box will help you cut nice, precise angles. You can do it with a hacksaw. I mean, seriously, I can't stress enough how simple this can actually be as long as you'll put the prep work in, the mental planning. Like, let's say I was building this lid. If I wanted to lay out this lid, I'd lay it in the floor. I would cut each individual piece. I would lay it in there in the way that I knew it needed to be welded together, and then I'd just label it. You know, I would label this piece, and then at each intersection, I'd put an A here, a B here, a C, you know, A, B, C, D, E, whatever, and then label each one of these, and then I would take all the pieces for this unit, just tape them together, set them to the side, and then do the next panel. Because then all you gotta do, find a shop. Every town has got a welding shop or two or a dozen of them. Find a shop that'll weld aluminum for you and show them the drawings that you've made. Maybe take a screenshot from this video and show them the frame assembled, and let them know what you're trying to build. And I can assure you guys, they will be willing, if you've put the time in to properly cut all the pieces to the right dimensions and the aluminum is clean and ready to go, they'll weld it together for you and do a nice job, and it won't cost you that much. So that's a way to get around not having your own welder or aluminum welder at home. You really can do this with simple tools. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the construction, and then we'll get into just a little bit more about plumbing, and then we'll kind of wrap this deal up. For me, the process started by first identifying how much water volume I wanted to be able to carry, and then kind of playing around with the equations to decide what dimensions would best get me to that volume without giving up unnecessary deck space on the boat. If you don't know how to calculate water volume, just do some quick Google searches. It's really not that complicated. But I knew that I wanted about a 25 to a 30 gallon bait well for days when all I need is, to carry some live bait. And then in the rare instance that I was going to do a catfish tournament, I needed something big. I needed something at least 80 gallons, up to maybe 100. I ended up on this one with a 91 gallon capacity. Once I got my capacity and my general dimension in mind, to me the first thing to do was to build the base, the bottom of this thing. And using this type of construction, just a square aluminum tubing construction, one thing to keep in mind is once you put the entire frame together, there will be a little bit of complexity involved in getting the bottom floor of this sheeting into your frame and still being able to seal it. Let me try to show you what I mean by that. Okay, if you look at the bottom here, you'll notice that I've got the outer frame and then the support bars going across the bottom. But if you can imagine looking at the inside, you have essentially the same thing on the sidewall. You've got an outer frame and supports, okay? I don't know if I can properly explain this, but if you leave it at just that, then when you set your floor in here, there won't be much for the floor to rest on, if that makes sense. So what I did is I put these gussets. I don't need these gussets for structural integrity. They're really only here to give the floor something to rest on in these corners without having to add a lot of extra material. By the way, when it comes to putting the sheeting on, in order to get it to seal, what I did is I just put a thin bead of silicone along every inch of the aluminum before I set the floor in place, gave it a few minutes to start to kind of tack up, and then I started drilling my holes to install my rivets. So again, I began by identifying how much volume I wanted to carry, converting that into what the dimensions, the physical dimensions of the frame were going to be, cutting and laying out all the pieces for each individual panel, welding those together. Then I had to address on the interior floor, how was I going to make sure that the floor had surface to set on in every nook and cranny. That's where the gussets came in. Add a little bit of silicone, install the floor, and then rivet it in place. Once that was set, I just repeated the same process to each of the exterior panels with this aluminum board, some cheap aluminum rivets, and which, by the way, was the most time-consuming part of the whole process, was installing all the rivets. This one's probably got 250 rivets in it, somewhere in that range. I didn't go fancy on the rivets. They're just cheap aluminum rivets from Harbor Freight. And they do a great job. Moving on, once the construction was done, I went forward with the plumbing. I showed you a little bit about the plumbing on the bait well, but let me show you the only way that the plumbing on this one is different. It's still a spray bar setup. It's still removable like the other one is. It's still the same size. But the one thing that this one has that the bait well does not is it does have some air stones in it. There's an air stone in each corner, and I just ran the lines back here to the same place where I hook up the water line. For that, you can run an oxygen tank and pump pure oxygen in there. But I don't do that. I just run the large 2-line bubble box, and it works great. Not that I use this tournament box a lot. I've only used it really 3 times, but it worked flawlessly. To me, what's more important than the oxygen or a bubble stone or an air stone is water exchange. I find water exchange to be the most important thing, along with properly aerated water. I started off with just a fill valve here, and later I learned a little bit more about the importance of a spray bar and getting aerated water rather than just a volume of water. So on that note, plumbing. How am I hooking this up, you might be asking? Well, I wanted it to be really a clean install on the boat, and I wanted it to be quick to install and quick to remove. So the way I approached that was I left a permanent water line on the boat that's always there. I'll put a picture over there. And it's just always hanging out there. It's not in the way. It doesn't take up floor space. I'm not tripping over it, anything like that. It's just always there for whenever I decide to install this or that. It's the same fitting, the same water line for either one, same size fittings, same pump. I'm pumping the same amount of volume. This one just takes longer to fill than that one. But the reason I went that route, rather than having the pump and the plumbing and the electrical attached to the box, is I felt like if I had went that route, then every time I wanted to install this, I would have to route those lines and mess with getting the water access, and it just seemed like that would be time consuming. And also I felt like it would be a less clean way to do it, and I'd be tripping over lines. And so if you can find a way to have your pump and your electrical feed for your pump permanently installed in your boat, then all you really have to have is a water line somewhere that's tucked neatly out of the way to attach to your portable live well or bait well, and you're up and going. So what about water evacuation? Well, this is where my application is going to be different than probably most of yours, because my boat is a pontoon, the Lucille 4. If you haven't seen it yet, I've got videos specifically about the Lucille 4 here on the channel. It's a full custom build that I did, and I've documented a pretty good portion of that here on the channel. But the pontoon is different, because what I do is I just open the drains here, and I allow the water to evacuate directly onto the deck, and it just runs right off the deck. Now, in a standard hull boat, that's not going to work for you. So you're either going to, there's a couple different ways to go around it, or to go about it. Basically, you're going to have to get creative. You're either going to need a second pump, or you're going to need a big enough drain line in the live well that it will evacuate water faster than your pump puts it in, and then you just need to route that in some way, either to the bilge for the boat or over the side. That's up to you. I can't solve all the questions for you on your build, because I don't know your boat. But that's how I did it. Got an onboard pump that's always connected, always plumbed. I just carry this to the deck, set it on the boat, hook up the water line, start fishing. That's it. That's all there is to it. Same thing with the other one. Okay. Man, this turned into a long-winded video, didn't it? Now, if you remember, the original video on this one, the bait well, it was only 2 minutes. But at that time, I had no idea that so many of you would be interested in this. I mean, really, they're just boxes, guys. That's it. Out of the box thinking to create something other than a cooler or toolbox conversion live well. That's really all it came down to. So I didn't know you guys would be interested in it. I did my best to try to show you the general idea of how I went about it, and to try to convey that I know you guys can do it too. Even if you don't have advanced tools or a welder, you don't have to buy an existing container that's less than ideal to get the results that you want. You can start from scratch just like I did and create something that you'll be super proud of, and that's super functional, and that does exactly what you wanted to do in the way you wanted to do it. On that note, I'm going to end this video by saying thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments regarding this build, hit me up in the comments below. I read them all and respond to most. Thanks for watching.